Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Grandmaster Bill Jones. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, The Master's Master, My Personal Journey with God. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. But guys, listen, if you want to gather everything that Bill has to offer, do yourself a favor and go directly to his personal site. Now, keep in mind, the book isn't available for purchase through the site. You still got to go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble for that. But if you want to gather more information about Bill and his background, check out masterbilljones.com. You know, and I will say, Bill was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Bill, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
Great, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours, and we're very much looking forward to speaking with you today, Bill. You know, as I stated, there's so much value in your book and in the wisdom that we're going to be able to receive from you. Now, before we go into the book, Bill, or technically, because this book is a memoir, this first question may tie into it, and if it does, fantastic. Start off by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, I really don't want to, boast about myself because it is about God. But if you really didn't know who I am and what I have achieved, you wouldn't understand the depth of my complication. I mean, you really wouldn't understand how deeply my life changed. Well, I've been doing martial arts for 59 years. I've studied 14 different forms of martial arts. I have 8 personal black belts, 4 master's degree, a 9th degree grandmaster, and 2 PhDs. And I've won 349 championships, 52 gold medals, 9 times competitive of the year, and have been honored to be inducted in 20 different times in Hall of Fames across the world. And then all of a sudden, my life changed. I ended up with Parkinson's disease. I was no longer able to walk, or to run, or ride my bike, or water the grass, or pet my dog's ears, or bathe myself, or put on my belt. I couldn't do my martial arts anymore. I stuttered when I spoke. I had tremors so severely bad that I lost all my students because they would cry just looking at me shaking so hard. They would put their little hands on me, try to heal me, but they couldn't. And so I lost my students, and I become very sick with the Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
And then, yes, terrible. And then from there, I didn't know what to do because I really didn't want to believe I had Parkinson's. You know, I've been such a strong, healthy man that could achieve, so many things. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't even walk anymore or ride the bike, or it was terrible, terrible, terrible. So I went to about 50 different specialists all over the world. I have 5 MRIs, neurologists, reflexology, you name it, I went to it. Went hands-on healing to every anointing priest and Joyce Myers and everybody. And I went here and there, and again, nothing could happen and nobody could heal me. About 2 weeks before deep brain stimulation, which we were going to cut my brain open and do deep brain stimulation, once at Stanford, one at UC San Francisco. First time I chickened out, but I've lost 75% of all my motor skills. Then after that, I thought to myself, I'd rather die. I mean, I have tremors. I can't drive. I can't feed myself. I'd rather just die. And then 2 weeks before the surgery, God stopped the tremors for 5 minutes in 4.5 years.
Wow.
And those 5 minutes, I filmed it. And then I couldn't believe it. The next day it was 10 minutes. The next day it was once a week. And then it was once a day. And then it was a whole day or half a day. And then it just started going good. And then my life started changing again. I had more complications. In 18 months, I lost my mother, my father, my brother, 5 of my brothers, and one of my sisters. And then I was financially in debt, about $75,000 in medical bills. I was 75% ready to die. I lost all my motor skills. And then my school has been there 40 years. I had a little trouble because I'm struggling. So they came to me and they said, I want your keys in 2 weeks, and threw me to the streets. Now, that's terrible. First, I lost all my family. Then I'm deadly, deadly sick with my Parkinson's. Then they kicked me to the streets, and I didn't know what to do. In 2 weeks, because my brother was homeless and I took care of him, he wrote out a will, said, whatever happens to me, whatever I get, if anything happens, goes to my brother Bill. But because I lost all my family, a little here and a little there, I turned around and ended up with $96,000 in 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, I was able to pay my $70-something thousand in medical bills. I ended up finding a karate school within 2 weeks. I don't know how I did. Open the first Christian martial arts school. I took the rest of the money and wrote the book. And then I took the rest of the money and I gave it to God to start Water for Life Ministry to help build wells around the world.
Bill, wow. Man, that's a way to start an interview. Whoa. Okay. All of that you just said is just the beginning. I mean, that's just the surface level stuff. There's still so much underneath. And that is why this book is so incredible, man. I mean, that is a wonderful and a fantastic way to start. You know, Bill, next question. I'd love to go into the title. I mean, the Master's Master, I can assume where that comes from. And I absolutely love the name. I mean, it's very enticing. It's so intriguing, and it instantly sucks you in. Now, talk to our listening audience, because I know that there's a story behind that. Talk to us a little bit more about the title and why you chose that to be the representation for your book.
Well, the book's supposed to have been the 7 days, the day of the tree and the day of the Lord, where I didn't eat food for 10 days and prayed, and God appeared to me in a bear form. But then as the book started heading on, it was more of where my journey started with God, the first miracle of God, and where I'm at today. And then I thought, well, I was dying and didn't think that I would even live to finish the book. So I told them that they couldn't finish the book because their story hadn't been told. And then when I actually thought about what the book was about, it was actually not about this person or that person, the miracles that God did for other people. It was actually my individual personal journey with God and what he personally did for me. And then from there, I decided to write the book, My Personal Journey with God. The Master's Master, because I'm the master and he's the Master's Master. He's my master. So the Master's Master, My Personal Journey with God. That's why I decided to choose that title.
Bill, let's go into inspiration. Talk to our listening audience. What compelled you to do that? What did you see that made you feel the public would be able to benefit from your story?
Well, God told me to give up, 2014, God says, give up the martial arts and spread the word of the Lord. He said, you have inspired more than the stars you can count in the sky, but the stories from your book will inspire millions and millions of people. I didn't really feel that I was going to finish the book. So these miracles were so beyond understanding that it needed to be told. So if there was anybody, because what got me started with the book was that when I started dying with the Parkinson's, there was nothing left of me. I had no hope. I couldn't think of anything. I had tremors so bad and couldn't walk and things that it was terrible. So the only thing I had left was to listen. I listened to Caleb radio station, and I listened to stories of people like me telling you how they struggled, how they survived. And that's what started me going, think, well, I got to write my stories, and maybe I can encourage somebody that when they're having hard times. And then God said, I want you to find a different person every day and inspire and encourage them and tell them a story from your book. So in the last 5 years, I've been doing that. I've autographed over 500 books to homeless and this and that.
Again, here in the line with Grandmaster Bill Jones, we're discussing his fantastic book, The Master's Master, My Personal Journey with God, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but make sure you're heading over to his personal site, MasterBillJones.com, to learn more about him and his background. You know, Bill, next question that I'd love to go into, and listen, my listening audience is going to get very upset with me if I don't hurry up and ask it. Okay, so let's just move right along. We know, as I started this interview by saying, your book is so timely. It's a great book, really, to be on anybody's shelf at any day, in any time, but especially given the past 1.5 to 2 years with this pandemic and the varying degrees of lockdown that we've all encountered. there's a lot of turbulence right now. There's a lot of uneasiness and a lot of fear in so many people's lives. I'd love to take this opportunity, Bill. Any words of wisdom that you can offer our listening audience, anybody out there listening in that finds themselves in a tough patch but can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, what words of wisdom would you be able to relay?
I did the martial arts and succeeded and accomplished many things, feeling to be undefeatable and a man that can accomplish and achieve anything. And then all of a sudden I was overwhelmed by Parkinson's disease, the death of my family, and many other complications. I lost my vision. I lost my hearing. I paralyzed both my arms for 8 years. It took me 3 years to walk and 8 years to run, and on and on. And then with the Parkinson's consuming me and losing my family and financially going into debt, I really didn't know what to do. So I started writing this book to show the world that no matter what kind of complications could happen to anybody, no matter what it could be, that through God, all things are possible. So as I wrote the book, I think if somebody reads my book, if there's some kind of story of demotivating and encouraging you about how we can get through the troubles we have, is just read one of those stories in a book. Sometimes when I'm having a hard time, God tells me to open up my own book and read it. And I have many times. And the book themselves, when I think about what God has done, because I lost my vision for 3 months. I lost my hearing for 4 months where I couldn't hear a word. I was paralyzed, got caught in a motorcycle wreck. And so I've had many hundreds of things just totally whip me, whack me, smash me down, whatever, maybe anxiety, tax 50 a day, whatever. And just my faith, just keep praying, never giving up. Even water can dig a hole through the hardest stone in time. And if you give that and you read my book, there's going to be some story in there that's just going to be part of what you're looking for, or the scriptures from the Bible. And from here, it's going to help you get through it and be able to achieve anything, because, again, through God, all things are possible. Now, if I can, let me tell you the very first story out of my book so you can understand how I knew there was a God and how did I know how strong and powerful he truly was. People would ask me, well, how did you know there was a God? Well, I knew there was a God because I went to church and everything, but I never asked God to do any favors for me. But I was about 6.5 years old, and I had a dog, and he used to always like to chase the cars and try to fight the tires. I don't know what was wrong with the dog, but he always did that. One day I was it's in Sacramento, that's El Camino. It's a big street where people go about 45, 50 miles an hour. Well, my dog again ran after one of those cars again, and as he was running across the street, a big old country Squire station wagon, about 2,000 pounds, hit him at 45 miles an hour and just threw him across the road, and he was dead. I had nobody left because I already at that time in my book lost my parents and everything like that as a child, my father. And then from there, I had only my dog. So as I ran over to grab my dog and he was dead, I held him in my arms. Of course, people then started calling, the police and whoever shows up. And back in the 60s, everybody showed up. Everybody wanted to see anything that went on. So we had the everyman, the policemen, and they were on motorcycles and this and that. Well, I looked and I was holding my dog in my arms, and a police officer came to me and he said, son, I need you to let go of the dog so I can take you home to your parents. And then I just wouldn't do it. And he showed me that the dog is dead. He already did this and this and this, and you can see he's not breathing and stuff. And it's been about a half hour, and we need to move the dog and get you out of here and get the people on their way. And we're going to ask you again, can you let go of the dog so we can move and I can take you home? And I said, no, I'm not going to let go. And now at that time, I was a child that really didn't understand death, so I really didn't know what to ask God for. But about that time, they called for the little truck to come to pick up my dog. It's been about an hour and a half by then. And when the truck came, the medical people that came, whoever it was, they showed me that the dog is 100% dead. And it's been dead for over an hour and a half. We're going to have to take the dead body and we're going to take you home. And that's the time I looked up to God and I said, God, I have nobody else but my little dog. Can you just make him stand and go home with me? I didn't understand him being dead. I just wanted him to stand up, go home with me. So I asked God, can you please let him stand up, go home with me? And he didn't do anything. And they said, son, you got to let go of the dog. Got to let go of the dog. And I said, I can't. And they said, son, you got to let go of the dog. And then I asked God again, God, please let my dog wake up and go home with me. And then all of a sudden he blinked his eyes. And I said, he blinked his eyes. And they go, no, he didn't, son. He's dead. He's dead. I go, no, he did. And I asked God again, and he blinked his eyes again. I go, look, he blinked his eyes again, and they didn't believe me. And then he stood up. There wasn't broken bone. There was no blood. I never took him to the doctors. Me and him just stood up and started walking home. And after there, I knew if God could take him and bring him back to life like that, that no matter what, through God, all things are definitely possible.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. You know, Bill, what I love so much about all of this is, man, these stories that you're telling are so profound, but yet there's so many of them, right? I mean, we've barely scratched the surface. There is still so much left to be discovered. Bill, as we start to tie out of this fantastic interview, man, the only other question that I can think of, I'm curious, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
Well, first, there was many times where the devil wanted me to stop doing what I was doing. But because every day for the last 12 years, I get up from 3 to 9 and read all the scriptures and watch all the people on TV. It was the Hades. One time they said that there was, because I was ready to surrender. He said, my father one time got to heaven, and when he got there, he seen hundreds and hundreds of boxes, like from UPS. And he says, well, what are all these boxes? And he says, these are the boxes of favors from God that people didn't pick up. And at that time, I needed all the help I could get. And he goes, look at it here. There's a box right here for favors, and this one goes to Bill. And that encouraged me to think, wow, God has favor for me. And he said, one day you're going to have a book which is going to have your name on it, and you're going to sing a song that you wrote. And this inspired me, knowing that God was leading me not to give up to do the things he wanted me to do. Now, one of the biggest one that really got me in my book was actually one of the last stories. There's over 50 stories in the book, because there's people that had kidney transplants that were dying and asked me to come pray for them, and then they didn't have to do it. There's people that were clinically dead, where the father cut down a tree, the tree spun, crushed a child. In the newspaper, it says that when they got there, it took 6 men to remove the tree from the man, the young boy. He was clinically dead. He was one of my 10-year-old children. Then the other child had an aneurysm in the brain, and he was also in a coma. And then as you'd read my book, I didn't eat food for 10 days. I prayed to God and offered myself as a sacrifice for they both to come alive. And then as God appeared to me in the bear form, which is an excellent story, the children both came alive within 7 days. And it was written in the Concosta Times. Thinking the only way it came alive is God in martial arts. But one of the greatest stories in my book is the one at the very end. I was so sick and dying so bad that I didn't remember anything. But at that time, God healed me. And I didn't remember being sick. But in my book, I basically died 3 different times. And at the end, I told the people writing my book, I said, you can't finish writing the book because there hasn't been a story, because there's a story that hasn't been told and hasn't been written. I don't know what it is. So when I went to the mountains in March, and it was terrible, raining and storms and like that, and it's just me and God. Many times in my book, it's always at the lake, probably about 100 different times. And I was there, and I got up at nighttime, and there was no moon, just hundreds and hundreds of stars. And I said, God, what if I was heading off to heaven right now, and I just didn't know it? And so I started heading up the little trail with the animals, taking to the top of the mountain. And as I got up to the top of the mountain, I come across an old man. And I said, excuse me, sir, can you help me find a trail that takes me to Jesus Christ? And the old man said, sure, we can find it together. And I said, but it's been raining. The trail's been washed away. I cannot see it. And he goes, that's because you don't supposed to see the trail. And I said, well, how do I know when I get there? He goes, how do you know you're not already there? I go, God, can you explain? He goes, if you died and woke up somewhere different, you would not know the difference between where you were and where you are. And if you've never had personal time with God, you may not know that I'm standing right beside you. And the reason that you cannot see the trail is because you're already here. You have known the presence of God. I do have one more story to share. This story is really, 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 really good. This happened just a few years ago, 2019, at the very end of the year, just before the coronavirus. This is really important. I told God, I said, well, God, you let me ride my bike. It took me 8 years and got across, swim across Lake Berryessa. So on the 8th year, I took off the life jacket, swim a half mile across Lake Berryessa with Parkinson's disease. And hundreds of people watched me for the last 9 years. But then I said, well, God, you let me swim. You let me do my martial arts. I don't stutter when I speak. The tremors slowed down. I said, God, I want to run. And God said, well, you have to walk first. And I said, I can't walk because when I wake up in the morning, my feet feel like walking on glass, like when you have diabetes. I can't walk. My leg doesn't work. My arm doesn't swing. My brain doesn't do it. But God said, if you want to run, you got to walk. And I thought, okay, it's 3:00 at night. I go outside and I can only walk on the heels of my feet because my feet hurt so bad. Well, that first night, because I hadn't walked a whole block in 14 years or something like that, I was able to walk around the whole block. I got the whole block. It took me 2.5 hours, but I did it. And then I kept going every night. I'd get up there with God. Now, when I go into the Holy Spirit, when I go into the spiritual world and I'm with God, there is no sickness. And then I don't walk crippled. There's no sickness. God heals me while I walk with God's presence. And as I walk. In a week, I was able to get up to 1 mile. And in 40 days, I swear to you, I walked 110 miles in the footsteps of God. And during that time, one of the nights before Easter was coming around, I was walking, and every night as I walk, I see my dominant shadow that stands in front of me that is attached to my feet. But this night when I'm walking along, I start to see another shadow appear. It starts to walk on the left side of me. I see its arms and then its head and then its body, and it's coming closer, and it's as dark as mine, but it is not attached to my feet. I'm afraid to look because I'm in the spiritual world, and I don't know what spiritual world I'm in, but I know I'm with God, so hopefully I'm protected, but I still don't want to look. As I stop, the shadow in front of me that I followed for the block disappears, and the shadow that walked beside me now becomes my shadow. As I walk the other 3 miles around and around and around and around, there's only one shadow. I don't understand. But as I finish at the end of the time and I start to meditate again before I walk into my house, again, I separating from the spiritual world into the flesh. I started to slow down to meditate before I go in my house, and I notice again the shadow begins to walk beside me. This time, as it catches up to me, I actually stop. I look down, I see my shadow attached to my feet. I look at the second shadow to the left of me, and then I look behind me, and there was a third shadow. I ask God, what does this mean? And God says, when you first begin to walk and you separate into the spiritual world, just as you begin to separate, one of the shadows is your flesh, and the other shadow is your spirit. And I go, how come there was only one shadow when I walked all the other times? He says, because that is of your spirit until it returns to the flesh. I go, well, how come there was two at the very end? Because when you meditated to go back into the flesh, the two shadows appeared again, one being your flesh and one being your spirit. I go, what is the third shadow? He said, that is God, because he is not of flesh, but only the spirit of God himself. Fantastic. And I said, I don't understand what the shadow means. Well, I read in the Bible and asked people and didn't know nothing. And then it came around. Easter came close, and it was the Jewish Passover, the shadow. God was giving me the shadow to anoint me, to anoint my house and my family, to protect me from the angel of death as the coronavirus comes to us.
Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com are the places you have to go. The Master's Master. My Personal Journey with God is the title you have to pick up. And Grandmaster Bill Jones is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. You surely will not be disappointed. Also, make sure you're checking into MasterBillJones.com to gather more information on Bill himself. Bill, this has been an honor, man. Yes. Truly, truly a pleasure. Thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
All right, thank you, sir, very much so, and I'm honored to do that, and I can't wait to hear the people respond to it.